So now let's go back to what we were talking about in terms of the polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, and this whole sense of that the first thing we go to as human beings in our nervous system is, am I safe? Am I safe here in this environment? Am I safe with you? So safe relationship is necessary for learning, and it's necessary for healing. What this polyvagal theory has really underscored and brought to light in a way that our previous understanding of the nervous system didn't is the crucial role of safe presence, safe relationship for healing. Often as yoga teachers, we're taught and trained, and so much of the emphasis is on the technical ability to do triangle pose or the technical skill of doing sphinx pose or something like that, or crow. It doesn't matter what the pose, that we're really very trained to pay attention to the specificity and precision of the pose. Those are good things, but they pale in comparison to how important it is that we are a safe person in our classroom, that we are a safe presence, that the relational field that we create in the classroom is safe. Because that's where the magic is, that's where the medicine is. It's only in that safe relational field that the person can take their attention off of the fight-flight response of protecting themselves enough to learn and grow and be free in whatever their experience that the yoga practice unleashes in them. Otherwise, they're always kind of holding it in. So very important for us to understand that, in a way, our job, our very first responsibility as a yoga teacher is creating that safe space, being a safe person to be around and creating an environment of safety. So I want to highlight this with two quotes from a woman named Linda Graham in a book called Bouncing Back. The brain rewires itself by focusing on new experiences and encoding in its neural circuitry the learning from those experiences. It does that most quickly through interactions with other people. In other words, we rewire our brains most quickly through interacting with other people, such as a yoga teacher. Even as adults, our brain's preferred method of learning resilience is interacting with resilient people around us through dialogue and shared work and play. This is how rewiring happens at its optimal. A really essential way of understanding how important the relationship is for healing to occur is that there are two hormones that work in opposite ways. Cortisol, you've probably heard about. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and it's released in our bodies when we are in that 911 sympathetic phase or state. It's something that is meant to spike up and then dissipate through our body, and it's very toxic to our system if it stays, in terms of chronic stress, if it stays in our system at high levels for long periods of time. It turns out oxytocin, which you also may have heard about, another hormone, is often called the love hormone. Oxytocin is the hormone that is flowing in both a mother and a baby when a mother is nursing a child. It also flows between any two people that are feeling a relationship, or any two beings, a pet and a person. Pets are oxytocin dispensers, okay? So little kids, babies, when we feel connected, into a sense of intimacy and safety in a relationship with another person, oxytocin is released throughout our system. Oxytocin reduces cortisol. Oxytocin drives down the cortisol, the stress hormone levels in our bodies. It's just a perfect encapsulation of what your presence in a yoga class can help do for your students as they come in. So the yoga teacher's job is to create this safe relationship with the student, safe relationships between students, and a safe environment for healing and learning to occur. And then within that safety, then you have the technical skills of knowing what kind of practice to be doing for each person or for that group, and monitoring how that's going and giving them the technical skill of your mastery of the different poses and the different practices and their effect. So there's now understood to be 3 primary ways to treat trauma. One is top down, and that is activating this social engagement, relational field. And that involves often talk therapy is a form of top down, or what's known as top down treatment. Bottom up treatment is these body centered approaches where you're encouraging people to reconnect with their bodies and have a more positive, rich relationship with their body, trusting relationship with their body. And thirdly, there's medication. Oftentimes people, especially people who have acute conditions, do the best with some combination of all 3 of those. It turns out that yoga is a top down and a bottom up approach to healing. Some people have called it a bottom-up approach because they're looking at only the body-centered aspect of what yoga is doing, like helping people reconnect to their bodies and trust their bodies and feel their bodies. So in that bottom-up approach, we're re-inhabiting the body slowly and learning to trust. We're increasing autonomic nervous system regulation. We're releasing the issues in the tissues, and we're getting more of a sense of empowerment and living in our bodies. But we're also doing the top-down functions of the safe container, the safe relationship with the teacher, the social engagement with the teacher and with the other students. And all of that is part of the top-down treatment. So yoga's got really a lot of the good qualities of both the top-down and the bottom-up, and eventually maybe it will even lead to lowering the medication or not even needing the medication for some of your students. So in terms of the process of healing from sexual trauma specifically, how students who are survivors of sexual trauma will come into the room, there's a strong sense of there being constant danger outside, not trusting people, not trusting situations, a distrust of also of yourself, not trusting the signals of your own body, not trusting your own judgment, because often there's been a blaming of self for what's happened. There can often be a situation because people start to disregard their body's signals that they are in danger in real situations where they are really in danger, that they could put themselves in unnecessary risk, that they could, be in parts of town or in situations that if they were listening to their bodies, they would know this is not a safe place for me to be. And that then, negative things can happen, and that reinforces their sense of, I can't trust myself, I can't trust my body, and everything's dangerous inside and outside me. There's this constant sense of emotional chaos. The limbic system is just really fired up. There's lots of suffering and negative emotion going on. And then there's all these physical trauma symptoms of insomnia. They're not sleeping enough. They're not necessarily taking good care of their, eating well. They're having pain. They're having problems digesting. All those kinds of symptoms. So on the left is this encapsulates the sense of what people are coming in. They're really kind of living in hell in a certain kind of way. Through the process of healing from sexual trauma and through going to yoga and meditation classes in which the teacher understands what trauma is and understands how to create safety and understands the practices and how they can regulate people, they learn to have a sense of healthy boundaries, because you're modeling healthy boundaries at all times as the teacher. They learn to trust only the trustworthy people. They learn to begin to get a sense of like, my hair is up on the back of my neck. I need to pay attention to that. This person's not trustworthy. I'm going to step back. They learn to trust their own judgment about all kinds of things. They build more of a sense of safety within themselves and trust within their own body. They are able more readily in the moment to process their feelings and emotions instead of just suppressing them because they're too overwhelming. And they're learning to have a sense of what it feels like to be in a regulated nervous system. So in short, a person walks in feeling unsafe in the world and unsafe with themselves. When I say unsafe with themselves, I mean they are constantly criticizing themselves. Their self-talk is super negative. And they do things to put themselves at risk. and they learn gradually to be safe with themselves and therefore safer in the world. So that's what yoga and meditation practice has to offer survivors of sexual trauma. And finally, we'll end this segment with a quote from a woman named Sarah Plummer. I've met her, and she's a wonderful veteran and yoga practitioner and yoga teacher and an MST survivor. Somehow, in a body experiencing very physical effects of depression and other multiple severe physical injuries, when I practiced yoga, I had less pain. In a world that felt like 24/7 chaos, like a battle zone at times, the mat gave me an anchor with which to align. Thank God for that 3x6 floor space, because it was where I could simply breathe without suffocating. So the question was, how applicable is this material that we just covered to trauma in general? And I would say it's very applicable. The thing that makes it particularly apropos in a sexual trauma situation is this whole idea of the body as the scene of the crime. When you have a PTSD from an IED explosion, it does affect your body, but that nothing may have ever physically touched your body. It was just the waves of the explosion that impacted your brain and your body. You may have had PTSD from something that touched, that you saw, you witnessed, or you may have PTSD of from something you did to somebody else. And all of this can be very applicable in terms of the way it affects a person's being and nervous system and psychology and their sense of safety with themselves. But when your body is the scene of the crime, when you were violated physically, it is especially true that that body can feel like enemy territory. And that you, just to survive, you feel like you need to move out of it.